Why do some people command instant respect the moment they walk into a room, while others spend their entire lives begging for scraps of attention that never come? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. The uncomfortable truth is that power in this world follows an ancient law that most people refuse to acknowledge. It's never handed over freely. It's seized, gripped, and fortified by those who understand that survival isn't about being liked. It's about being irreplaceable. Has this ever happened to you? You've watched someone with less experience, fewer qualifications, maybe even questionable character, somehow rise above you in influence and command, while you followed the rules, played nice, and waited for your turn that never came. The difference isn't luck, connections, or even talent. It's the understanding of a fundamental principle that separates those who control their destiny from those who remain at the mercy of others. Most people spend their lives in what I call the approval trap, constantly seeking validation, bending for recognition, teaching the world through their desperate behavior that they can be treated as insignificant. They become predictable, dispensable, forgettable. But there exists another path, one that transforms you from someone who asks for permission into someone who others need permission from. This isn't about manipulation for the sake of cruelty. This is about survival, distilled to its purest, most strategic form. When you master these principles, something profound shifts in how others perceive and treat you. You stop being optional in their lives and become essential. What you're about to discover might surprise you, especially if you've been conditioned to believe that kindness and submission are the paths to success. The strategies we're exploring today have been used by leaders, innovators, and influencers throughout history, not because they were inherently ruthless people, but because they understood that in a world where everyone wants something from you, you must control the terms of engagement. Stay with me until the end, because each strategy builds upon the last, creating a complete transformation in how you navigate power dynamics in every area of your life. Whether it's in your career, relationships, or personal goals, these principles will shift you from being someone who hopes for the best to someone who creates the conditions for their own success. The journey begins with a simple but powerful realization. You are not here to blend into the background, to accept whatever scraps others decide to throw your way, or to live under the illusion that good things come to those who simply wait. You are here to become the storm that others cannot replace, cannot ignore, and cannot control. And it all starts with understanding the first fundamental strategy that will reshape everything you thought you knew about influence and respect. If these insights into human psychology and influence resonate with you, consider subscribing to the channel. The content here goes deeper than surface-level advice. We explore the psychological dynamics that most people never learn to recognize or navigate consciously. The hidden truth behind every power dynamic lies in something most people never recognize. Reality isn't fixed. Every conversation, every meeting, every interaction happens within what psychologists call a frame, the invisible mental lens through which people interpret what's happening around them. And here's the revelation that changes everything. Whoever controls that frame controls the entire interaction. Think about the last time you walked into a room where someone immediately commanded attention without saying a word. What you witnessed wasn't charisma or luck. It was frame control in action. That person had made a fundamental decision that most people never make. They refused to accept the default reality and instead created their own. While everyone else was unconsciously adapting to the existing atmosphere, they were quietly reshaping it to serve their purposes. This transformation in your approach begins with understanding a simple but profound shift in mindset. When you enter any space, you have two choices. You can either accept the emotional temperature, the pace, the priorities that others have set, or you can decide what matters in that moment. The weak unconsciously absorb whatever energy surrounds them, becoming reactive, seeking approval, hoping to fit in. But those who understand true influence make a different choice entirely. They walk in and immediately begin defining what's important through their presence, their focus, their energy. They don't announce this verbally. That would be crude and obvious. Instead, they demonstrate it through their behavior, their questions, their body language, the topics they choose to engage with or ignore. Within minutes, others begin unconsciously aligning with their rhythm, their priorities, their perspective. The psychology behind this is fascinating. Human beings are hardwired to look for social cues about how to behave, what to value, what deserves attention. When someone consistently demonstrates that they operate from their own internal compass rather than seeking external validation, others instinctively begin to view them as a source of direction rather than just another participant in the social dynamic. Now, I want to go even deeper into this concept because most people completely misunderstand what frame control actually means. It's not about dominating conversations or forcing your opinions on others. That's amateur hour. True frame control is far more subtle and infinitely more powerful. It's about creating an invisible structure within which all interactions take place, where your perspective becomes the reference point against which everything else is measured. Consider how this plays out in everyday situations. During negotiations, the person who sets the frame determines whether the discussion centers around price, value, timeline, or relationship. In social gatherings, frame control decides whether the atmosphere becomes competitive, collaborative, serious, or playful. In professional settings, it determines whether meetings focus on problems or solutions, limitations or possibilities. The person controlling the frame isn't necessarily talking the most or making the loudest points. They're simply operating from a clear internal foundation that others begin to reference. This journey of transformation requires you to stop being a passenger in other people's realities and start becoming the architect of your own. The impact extends far beyond individual interactions because once you master this principle, people begin to experience you differently in every context. Write in the comments, "I choose my own frame," if this perspective is starting to shift how you see your daily interactions. But here's where the transformation becomes even more profound, and this revelation completely shifts how you approach influence. Real power doesn't come from arguing your point or trying to convince people through logic and debate. Those approaches actually signal weakness because they imply your perspective needs external validation to be valid. Instead, the most influential people master something far more subtle. They present their viewpoint in such a way that alternatives don't even seem to exist in the conversation. This mindset shift happens when you stop trying to win arguments and start creating frameworks where your approach appears to be the natural, obvious choice. It's not about manipulation. It's about clarity of vision combined with confident presentation. When someone operates from this level of certainty, others begin to unconsciously adopt their perspective as the baseline for decision-making. The psychology behind this is rooted in how our brains process information. We're constantly looking for cognitive shortcuts, and when someone consistently demonstrates clear thinking without desperation for agreement, we begin to trust their judgment as a reliable reference point. They become our mental compass in uncertain situations. Now let me share something that might challenge everything you've been taught about building relationships and influence. Most people believe that being constantly available, always responsive, perpetually helpful, makes them valuable to others. The hidden truth is exactly the opposite. When you're everywhere, accessible at every moment, responding to every message instantly, you teach people that your time and attention have no premium value. This journey of understanding scarcity reveals something counterintuitive about human psychology. We don't cherish what's abundant, we take it for granted. But when something becomes rare, When access requires effort or timing, our entire relationship with it transforms. The same principle that makes diamonds valuable despite being less useful than water applies to personal influence and relationships. The impact of strategic withdrawal is immediate and profound. When you're no longer the person who's always available, always eager to help, always ready to engage, people's minds begin working differently around you. They start wondering what you're doing when you're not responding. They begin to value the interactions they do have with you more highly because they can't predict or control when the next one will happen. Behind the scenes of every magnetic personality is this understanding. Absence creates a vacuum that draws thoughts inward. When you're not physically present, you become mentally present in others' minds as they wonder about your activities, your decisions, your perspective on things happening around them. This mental real estate is infinitely more valuable than physical presence because it's active engagement with your influence, even when you're nowhere to be found. The revelations continue to unfold when you realize that this isn't about playing games or being difficult. It's about recognizing that your energy, time, and attention are finite resources that should be invested strategically rather than scattered indiscriminately. When you begin operating from this principle, people naturally start treating your presence as a privilege rather than an expectation. Put down "I understand scarcity" if you're beginning to see how this shifts the entire dynamic of how others relate to you. The crucial element that separates those who understand influence from those who accidentally push people away lies in timing. This transformation requires surgical precision in your decisions about when to engage and when to step back. Most people make the mistake of withdrawing when they're already being ignored or when the relationship has cooled. That's not strategic, that's reactive. The hidden truth is that you must withdraw when you're at your absolute peak in their mind, when your presence feels most valuable, when they're most engaged with you. The like button is a simple way to acknowledge the value exchange we've just had, your attention for insights that can genuinely shift how you approach relationships and influence. It takes a second and helps me understand what resonates most. This mindset shift challenges everything we've been taught about maintaining connections. The conventional wisdom says to strike while the iron is hot, to capitalize on positive momentum. But those who master influence understand something deeper. The most powerful impression you can leave is the one that's interrupted at its height. When you step away precisely when someone is most invested in the interaction, you create a psychological imprint that lingers far longer than any conversation that naturally fades to its conclusion. The journey of mastering this principle reveals something profound about human psychology. We're wired to chase what moves away from us and to take for granted what remains constant. When your withdrawal feels sudden and deliberate, when it's clearly a choice rather than circumstance, it triggers something primal in others' minds. They experience your absence not as a casual gap, but as a noticeable void that demands attention. Behind the scenes of every magnetic personality is this understanding. Absence, properly executed, doesn't just create space, it creates hunger. The longer someone goes without access to what they've come to value, the more their mind works to fill that gap. They begin constructing scenarios about what you're doing, who you're with, what's capturing your attention. This mental activity is infinitely more engaging than any actual interaction because it's self-generated and therefore more personally meaningful. The revelations continue as you realize that this process transforms casual interest into something much more powerful. When someone discovers they can't predict or control access to you, when your presence becomes a variable rather than a constant, their entire relationship with you shifts. What started as simple curiosity about your activities evolves into genuine concern about maintaining their position in your priorities. This isn't about creating anxiety or insecurity, it's about establishing value through scarcity. the impact ripples through every subsequent interaction, because once people understand that time with you is finite and unpredictable, they approach those moments with heightened awareness and investment. The conversation becomes more focused, their attention more complete, their appreciation more genuine. Now, I want to explore how this principle operates on an even deeper psychological level, because what happens during your absence is just as important as the withdrawal itself. The space you create becomes fertile ground for something that drives all human behavior: the fear of loss. When someone realizes they could lose access to something they value, their perception of its worth intensifies exponentially. Write in the comments, "I master my timing," if you're starting to see how strategic withdrawal creates more influence than constant availability ever could. The moment people can predict your every reaction, your every decision, your every response, something fundamental shifts in the dynamic between you and them. You transform from being a player in the game to becoming a piece on their board. This transformation happens so gradually that most people never notice it occurring, but the impact is devastating to your influence and respect. When your patterns become transparent, when others can map out exactly how you'll respond to different situations, you hand them a blueprint for managing you. They know which buttons to push to get compliance, which approaches will make you defensive, which requests you'll automatically agree to. Your predictability becomes their tool for control, and you don't even realize you've surrendered your autonomy. The hidden truth is that mystery isn't just attractive, it's strategically essential. When people can't quite figure you out, when they can't predict your next move with certainty, something powerful happens in their minds. They become alert around you. Before making decisions that involve you, they pause and consider, what will his response be? This mental hesitation, this moment of uncertainty, is where your leverage lives. Behind the scenes of every truly influential person is this understanding. Unpredictability creates a low-level tension that keeps others engaged and respectful. Not the kind of tension that comes from fear or anxiety, but the kind that emerges from genuine uncertainty about what you might do or say next. This keeps you relevant in their calculations because they can never fully account for your variables. But here's where most people completely misunderstand this principle and end up sabotaging themselves. They think unpredictability means being erratic, dramatic, or randomly changing their behavior for shock value. That's not strategic unpredictability. That's chaos masquerading as power. True strategic unpredictability is calculated, purposeful, and designed with a specific outcome in mind. The difference is profound. Chaotic unpredictability makes people avoid you because you become exhausting and unreliable. Strategic unpredictability makes people pay attention to you because you become interesting and formidable. One is weakness disguised as strength. The other is strength exercised with precision. This journey of mastering calculated unpredictability requires you to break your own patterns deliberately. If you always respond immediately to messages, occasionally take longer. If you typically agree to social invitations, sometimes decline without extensive explanation. If you usually take the diplomatic approach in disagreements, occasionally be more direct. These aren't random acts, they're conscious disruptions to prevent others from developing too comfortable a read on you. The revelations deepen when you realize this isn't about keeping people guessing for entertainment. It's about maintaining your position as someone who operates from internal decision-making rather than external impression. When others can't predict you, they can't manipulate you through assumed patterns of behavior. Now let me reveal something even more sophisticated about how this principle operates in the psychology of influence. Because unpredictability does something remarkable to how others perceive your competence and power. Write in the comments, "I choose unpredictability," if you're beginning to see how breaking your own patterns protects your autonomy and influence. When you operate with strategic unpredictability, something remarkable happens in the psychology of those around you. uncertainty doesn't just create curiosity, it generates a form of respect that comes from genuine wariness. Your allies begin to treat you with more consideration because they understand they don't have complete access to your decision-making process. They can't take your support for granted because they're never entirely sure what factors you're weighing or what might influence your next move. Even more revealing is how this affects those who might oppose you. When people can't predict your responses or counterattacks, they approach conflicts with you much more carefully. They spend time trying to anticipate your moves, which means you're occupying valuable mental real estate in their strategic thinking. This invisible influence happens without you having to demonstrate any direct aggression or confrontation. The hidden truth behind this principle becomes clear when you study nature's most effective predators. The animals that survive and thrive aren't necessarily the biggest or strongest. They're the ones that master the art of concealment and timing. A lion doesn't announce its hunting intentions. A snake doesn't telegraph its strike. They move with calculated silence, appearing only when the moment demands decisive action. Human psychology responds to these same patterns because we've evolved alongside these dynamics for millennia. When someone operates with this kind of deliberate unpredictability, it triggers an ancient recognition in others' minds. They sense they're dealing with someone who thinks strategically, who doesn't reveal their hand prematurely, who operates from a position of considered strength rather than reactive emotion. This transformation in your approach requires conscious disruption of your established patterns. The journey begins with small, seemingly insignificant changes that signal to others that you operate from internal choice rather than external conditioning. If your typical response time to messages is immediate, deliberately take longer sometimes. If you consistently accept invitations or requests, occasionally decline without extensive justification, if you always take the accommodating position in group decisions, sometimes advocate for a different direction, these aren't arbitrary rebellions against your own nature. They're calculated demonstrations that your behavior stems from conscious decision-making rather than automatic patterns. The impact of these small disruptions ripples outward because people begin to realize they can't predict or manage your responses through familiar approaches. Behind the scenes, what's happening is even more sophisticated. When you break your own patterns, you force others to engage with you more thoughtfully. They can't rely on assumptions about how you'll react, so they have to actually consider your perspective, your current state of mind, your priorities in each specific situation. This deeper engagement naturally leads to greater respect and more careful treatment. Now, let me share with you how this principle connects to something even more fundamental about influence and control, because once people recognize they can't map your responses, they begin to approach you with a completely different level of attention and investment. Write in the comments, "I break my patterns," if you're ready to start disrupting the predictable responses that have been limiting your influence. The transformation deepens when you master the art of selective revelation. Most people make the critical error of showing their complete thought process, their full emotional state, their entire decision-making framework in every interaction. They believe transparency builds trust, but what it actually does is hand others a roadmap for predicting and influencing their future choices. The hidden truth is that mystery isn't just attractive, it's protective. When someone asks you a direct question, your instinct might be to provide a comprehensive answer, but those who understand influence respond differently. They might answer with another question, share a fragment of their perspective, or reveal just enough to keep the conversation engaging without exposing their complete position. This isn't deception, it's strategic communication that maintains your autonomy while keeping others invested in understanding you. Behind the scenes of every magnetic personality is this understanding. People value what they have to work for more than what's freely given. When you make others piece together your thoughts and motivations from carefully selected fragments, they become more engaged with you than if you'd simply laid everything out plainly. Their minds stay active around you, constantly processing and trying to understand the fuller picture. The journey of mastering this principle extends into how you manage your emotional expression. Most people present the same energy, the same warmth, the same responsiveness in every interaction because they believe consistency equals reliability. But this predictable emotional tempo actually diminishes your impact over time. People become accustomed to your baseline and stop registering your presence as significant. Subscribing ensures you'll be part of these ongoing conversations about power, influence, and human behavior. This isn't content you'll find everywhere, and your subscription tells me these psychological insights matter to you. Strategic emotional variation means being genuinely warm and engaging in one encounter, then more reserved and focused in another. Not dramatically different, that would signal instability, but subtly varied in ways that keep people recalibrating how they approach you. This doesn't mean being fake or manipulative with your emotions. It means allowing different aspects of your natural personality to emerge based on your assessment of what each situation requires. The revelations continue when you realize that people are constantly testing boundaries, often unconsciously, when they believe they understand your limits, your thresholds, your breaking points. They naturally begin operating right up to those perceived lines. This happens in negotiations, relationships, professional settings, everywhere humans interact. The moment you become predictable in where you draw lines, others start using that predictability to their advantage. Now, let me share something that connects all these principles into something even more powerful, because when you combine controlled revelation with emotional variation and hidden boundaries, you create what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, one of the most compelling forces in human psychology. Write in the comments, "I control my reveals," if you're starting to see how selective sharing creates more engagement than total transparency ever could. Intermittent reinforcement operates on a principle that most people never consciously recognize, but constantly experience. It's the psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive, relationships compelling, and certain personalities utterly magnetic. When you combine unpredictable revelation with varied emotional expression and shifting boundaries, you create a dynamic where others never quite know what to expect from you, which keeps their minds actively engaged. The transformation continues when you realize that staying one move ahead isn't about being cleverer than everyone else. It's about never allowing others to hold a complete map of who you are. The moment someone believes they've figured you out entirely, they stop paying close attention. They categorize you, file you away mentally, and begin treating you according to their assumptions rather than your current reality. This mindset shift requires you to continuously evolve aspects of your presentation while maintaining your core identity. When people think they understand your typical response to pressure, you demonstrate calm where they expected stress. When they assume they know your interests and capabilities, you reveal knowledge or skills they hadn't accounted for. You're not pretending to be someone else. You're simply ensuring they never see the complete picture all at once. Behind the scenes of this principle lies something counterintuitive about opposition and resistance. When you master these dynamics, people who can't predict or control you will respond in one of two ways. They'll either respect your autonomy and work with you, or they'll attempt to undermine or challenge you. Both outcomes actually serve your interests, though for different reasons. Submission gives you direct influence because people who respect your boundaries and unpredictability naturally defer to your judgment and seek your approval. But opposition provides its own advantages because those who plot against you often underestimate your capabilities precisely because they can't fully read you. They make plans based on incomplete information, which gives you opportunities to outmaneuver them. The revelations deepen when you study how history's most effective strategists approached influence and conflict. Sun Tzu wrote about appearing weak when strong and strong when weak. Machiavelli understood that maintaining mystery about your true intentions prevents enemies from preparing adequate responses. These weren't just military tactics, they were insights into fundamental aspects of human psychology that apply to every form of social interaction. The journey of implementing these principles requires patience because the impact builds over time. Each interaction where you demonstrate strategic unpredictability, each moment where you reveal just enough to stay engaging while concealing enough to maintain mystery, each decision to break your own patterns contributes to a reputation that precedes you into every room. Now let me explore how these psychological dynamics create something even more powerful in terms of lasting influence, because when people can never quite pin you down completely, they begin to attribute capabilities and depths to you that extend far beyond what you've actually demonstrated. Write in the comments, "I stay ahead," if you're beginning to understand how controlling the information others have about you maintains your strategic advantage in every interaction. This psychological phenomenon creates something remarkable in how others relate to you. When people can't predict your responses or fully categorize your personality, their minds become hypervigilant around you. They listen more carefully to your words, watch your expressions more closely, and replay your interactions in their thoughts long after they've ended. This isn't conscious effort on their part. It's an automatic response to uncertainty that gives you premium real estate in their mental space without you having to earn or maintain it. Through constant effort, the transformation accelerates when you realize that even subtle changes in your presentation can trigger this recalibration process. Most people maintain exactly the same appearance, the same energy patterns, the same conversational style year after year. But strategic individuals understand that occasional shifts in how they present themselves forces others to question whether they're witnessing growth, change, or hidden depths they hadn't previously recognized. This doesn't mean dramatic reinvention or artificial persona changes. It means allowing different aspects of your authentic self to emerge at different times. Maybe you've always been well-dressed, but suddenly start incorporating more creative elements. Perhaps you've typically been serious in professional settings, but begin showing more humor. These shifts make people wonder what else they might have missed about you, what other capabilities or interests you haven't revealed. Behind the scenes of this strategy is a deeper understanding of how perception works. People create mental models of everyone they interact with, and once those models feel complete, they stop paying close attention. But when evidence emerges that their model might be incomplete or outdated, they become alert again. They start asking themselves if you're evolving in ways they haven't tracked, if there are dimensions to your personality they've underestimated. The revelations about this approach lead to something crucial that separates those who use these principles effectively from those who damage themselves trying to implement them. Unpredictability, without a foundation of genuine competence and self-control, becomes chaos. If you're unreliable in your commitments, inconsistent in your quality of work, or unstable in your core character, then adding unpredictability to the mix will push people away rather than draw them closer. The journey of mastering these dynamics requires you to first establish a reputation for excellence in your fundamentals. People need to trust your competence, respect your judgment, and rely on your integrity before strategic unpredictability becomes magnetic rather than concerning. Without this foundation, variation in your behavior signals instability rather than depth. This is why the most influential people combine unpredictability in their tactics with absolute consistency in their standards. They might be impossible to predict in terms of their specific responses or choices, but they're completely reliable when it comes to their level of preparation, their commitment to excellence, and their core principles. Now, let me reveal how this foundation of mastery creates the conditions for something even more powerful in terms of lasting influence and control. Write in the comments, "I build on mastery," if you understand that unpredictability only works when it's anchored in genuine competence and reliability. When you master this foundation of competence combined with strategic unpredictability, something profound shifts in how others categorize you. Most people get mentally filed away after others feel they've figured them out. They become predictable, manageable, forgettable. But those who understand influence aim for something entirely different. They want to be studied rather than understood, analyzed rather than solved. This transformation in how others perceive you creates a completely different dynamic. Predictable people get categorized once and then largely ignored unless they're needed for something specific. But unpredictable people who operate from a foundation of excellence become subjects of ongoing analysis. Others find themselves thinking about your decisions, your motivations, your next moves, even when you're not present. This mental occupation is infinitely more valuable than simple recognition or approval. The journey toward this level of influence requires confronting an uncomfortable truth about human nature and relationships. Most people approach connections from a place of emotional dependence, clinging to others' approval, becoming attached to specific outcomes, needing certain people to validate their choices. This attachment, however natural it feels, becomes a chain that others can use to influence and control your decisions. If this content opened your mind to new perspectives on human dynamics, hitting the like button helps other people discover these concepts. It's a small action that extends the reach of ideas that could change how they navigate their own interactions. Behind the scenes of every person who commands genuine respect is this understanding. Emotional dependence signals vulnerability that others will inevitably exploit. When you need someone's approval to feel confident, when you can't imagine succeeding without a particular relationship, when specific outcomes become essential to your happiness, you hand others tremendous power over your emotional state and your choices. The revelations deepen when you realize that controlled detachment isn't about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about maintaining the ability to make decisions based on what serves your long-term interests rather than your immediate emotional needs. This means approaching relationships, opportunities, and commitments as investments that should produce value over time. When they stop serving that purpose, you must be capable of redirecting your energy without being paralyzed by sentiment or fear of loss. This mindset shift challenges everything most people believe about loyalty, commitment, and care. But those who master influence understand that the person who can walk away from any situation always holds more leverage than the person who feels trapped by their attachments. This doesn't mean you don't form deep connections or care about others. It means you never surrender your autonomy to maintain those connections. The impact of this approach extends far beyond individual relationships, because when others sense that you're not dependent on their approval or presence, they begin treating you with a different level of respect. They understand that their position in your life is earned and maintained through mutual value rather than your emotional neediness. Now let me explore how this principle of controlled detachment creates the foundation for something even more powerful in terms of building lasting influence and command. Write in the comments, "I choose detachment," if you're ready to transform how you approach relationships and dependencies in your life. Controlled detachment transforms every interaction because it fundamentally shifts the balance of power in any relationship or negotiation. The person who genuinely can walk away without devastating personal consequences always holds more cards than the person who feels they must stay at any cost. This isn't a bluff or a manipulation tactic. It's a genuine position of strength that comes from building a life where no single relationship, opportunity, or outcome controls your well-being. The transformation begins with recognizing that your ability to detach is your most valuable asset in any dynamic where someone might try to leverage your emotional investment against you. When others sense that losing access to you would genuinely impact their situation, while you would simply redirect your energy elsewhere, the entire framework of the relationship changes. They become more careful about taking you for granted, more considerate in their requests, more respectful of your boundaries. This journey requires daily practice through seemingly small decisions that reinforce your autonomy. When you decline an invitation without extensive justification, when you don't respond to messages immediately despite being available, when you keep certain plans or thoughts private, even when others probe for details, you're training both yourself and others to understand that your choices stem from internal decision-making rather than external pressure. Behind the scenes of this approach is something most people find counterintuitive. The more capable you become of detaching, the more magnetic you become to others. People are naturally drawn to what they can't fully control or predict. When someone realizes they can't manipulate you through emotional dependency or guilt, when they understand that your presence in their life is a choice rather than a need, they begin to value that presence more highly. The revelations deepen when you master perhaps the most sophisticated expression of detachment, leaving at your peak. This means stepping back from situations, relationships, or opportunities when your value is highest, rather than waiting until you've been diminished or taken for granted. Most people stay too long, allowing familiarity to breed contempt, watching their influence erode gradually until they're either pushed out or become irrelevant. But those who understand strategic detachment recognize the power of the well-timed exit. They leave when their image is still burning bright in others' minds, when the last memory others have is of their strength, competence, and self-sufficiency. This creates a lasting impression that echoes far longer than any gradual fade into background noise. The impact of this mindset extends beyond individual relationships because it creates a reputation that precedes you. People begin to understand that access to you is finite and valuable, that your attention and energy are resources that must be earned rather than assumed. Now let me share how this foundation of detachment creates the conditions for building something even more substantial and lasting in terms of true power and influence. Write in the comments, "I master my exits," if you're beginning to see how strategic withdrawal can be more powerful than desperate persistence. Strategic detachment creates the mental space and emotional freedom necessary to focus on building something far more substantial than temporary influence through charm or manipulation. While charisma can open doors and create initial opportunities, lasting power requires a foundation that can't be easily shaken or replicated by others. This foundation is built through the systematic accumulation and strategic deployment of resources. The transformation from someone who relies on personality alone to someone who commands genuine leverage happens when you understand that resources extend far beyond financial wealth. Information becomes a form of currency when you know things others need to know. Skills become weapons when you can solve problems others can't handle. Relationships become assets when you've cultivated genuine mutual value with people in positions of influence. Reputation becomes armor when your track record speaks before you do. Behind the scenes of every person who wields lasting influence is this understanding: true wealth isn't a single source of power, but an interconnected ecosystem where each element strengthens the others. When you develop a valuable skill, it opens access to new relationships. Those relationships provide information that creates opportunities. Those opportunities build reputation that attracts more valuable connections. This creates a compounding effect where your total influence becomes greater than the sum of its parts. The journey of building this ecosystem requires a mindset shift away from immediate gratification toward long-term strategic thinking. You begin collecting favors like investments, offering value before you need value returned. You develop capabilities not just for their immediate usefulness, but for how they might serve future opportunities you can't yet see. You build relationships not just for current benefit, but for the network effects they might create over time. The revelations deepen when you realize that resource management is as important as resource acquisition. The hidden truth is that showing your full capacity too early or too completely can actually work against you. When others can see the complete scope of your capabilities, connections, and assets, they can prepare adequate responses or defenses. They can calculate exactly what they're dealing with and plan accordingly. Strategic concealment means revealing just enough of your resources to earn respect and caution without exposing your full range of options. Let them see that you have influence, but not the complete extent of your network. Demonstrate competence, but keep some capabilities in reserve. Show financial stability without revealing your complete resources. This creates uncertainty about your true capacity, which makes others more careful about how they engage with you. Now let me explore how this approach to resource building and concealment creates something even more powerful in terms of shaping how others perceive and interact with you on a fundamental level. Write in the comments, "I build my arsenal," if you're ready to start thinking strategically about accumulating and deploying the resources that create lasting influence. This systematic approach to resource building creates the foundation for something even more sophisticated, the deliberate crafting of perception. Most people operate under the misconception that their reputation will naturally reflect their actual capabilities and character. The hidden truth is that perception operates independently of reality, and if you don't actively shape how others see you, someone else will do it for you, and they'll do it to serve their interests, not yours. The transformation from passive reputation management to active perception control requires understanding that your image is currency in every social and professional interaction. What others believe about your capabilities, your connections, your track record, your character, these beliefs influence their decisions about you before you even speak. When you walk into a room, people are already operating from assumptions about who you are and what you represent. Behind the scenes of every magnetic personality is this recognition. Perception must be architected deliberately, like building a fortress brick by brick. Each public appearance, each interaction, each choice about what to reveal or conceal should feed into the image you want permanently burned into others' minds. This isn't about creating a false persona. It's about strategically emphasizing the aspects of your authentic self that serve your long-term objectives while allowing less relevant qualities to remain in the background. The journey toward mastering perception control intersects with something equally important: the maintenance of psychological distance. Closeness breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds contempt. When people can access you too easily, when they can predict your availability, when they feel they have complete understanding of your motivations and capabilities, respect begins to erode. Psychological distance forces others to reach for you, to think about you, to work for access to your time and attention. This principle creates a paradox that most people never grasp. The more available you make yourself, the less valuable others perceive you to be. But when access to you requires effort, timing, or merit, every interaction becomes more significant in their minds. They prepare more carefully for conversations with you. They value your input more highly. They remember your words longer because scarcity has amplified the perceived worth of your attention. The revelations culminate in understanding the ultimate objective of all these strategies, achieving a state where others don't just want you around, they need you. The end game isn't being liked or admired, though those may be byproducts. The goal is becoming essential to others' success, comfort, or objectives. When you reach this level of irreplaceability, you transform from being optional to being indispensable. When all these principles align in your approach to influence and relationships, you create something that most people never achieve, a presence that others can't easily categorize, predict, or replace. You become someone who operates from genuine strength rather than desperate need, someone who shapes interactions rather than simply reacting to them. The transformation we've explored today isn't about becoming cold or calculating, it's about understanding the psychological dynamics that already exist in every human interaction and learning to navigate them with awareness rather than leaving everything to chance. Most people stumble through relationships and professional situations without recognizing the subtle power dynamics at play, wondering why some individuals seem to effortlessly command respect while others struggle for basic consideration. If this content resonated with you, if it shifted how you think about influence and interaction, I'd appreciate you subscribing to the channel. The insights we explore here go deep into human psychology and practical strategies that most people never encounter elsewhere. Your subscription tells me these conversations matter to you, and it ensures you won't miss future content that builds on these foundations. Leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you made it through this entire exploration. That phrase lets me know you absorbed not just the surface strategies, but the deeper psychological principles underlying them. The like button matters too. It's a simple way to acknowledge the connection we've built through this conversation and helps others discover these insights. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, diving into the psychology of presence and command that builds on everything we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey toward understanding true influence is just getting started.